What's going on, everybody, and welcome to an actually special edition, a Memorial Day edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Ellis, and we are presented by Natty State Sports. I'm coming to you from today, or coming to you today from a very different location. It's a mystery. Is it my place? Is it our new studio? Is it my girlfriend's parents' house? Who knows? Who's to say? We will never know. But coming to you from an undisclosed location. But like I said, I hope you are having a beautiful Memorial Day. Hope you got some burgers, hot dogs going. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you're enjoying not being at work today. Wouldn't that be nice? Not working on Memorial Day. Wouldn't that be something? I myself, for those of you that watched last week's show, know that I just got back from the beach. So I'm ready to lock in, ready to launch into postseason play. As are the Arkansas Razorbacks, who just recently became announced as the number 5 overall national seed in the NCAA Tournament, which starts Friday, and Arkansas will be hosting in the Fayetteville Regional this weekend and potentially a Fayetteville Super Regional next weekend. So a tough look a little bit for the Hoover isn't meaningless crowd, because Arkansas went 0-2 in Hoover, and it didn't matter at all. They were projected as number 5 going into the week. They were the number 5 seed coming out of the week. And you saw teams like Alabama, who kind of needed a win, didn't get a win, and didn't matter. Same with Florida, who didn't play well. Turns out the SEC tournament doesn't matter, which we kind of knew going in, but it is what it is. But I'm happy to be joined by all you guys today and getting back going with the Baumbastic Podcast. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up this week. We're going to be trying. I'm going to, it might not be every single day, but this is going to be the first of a few shows we have this week. More previewing the Fayetteville Regional, getting a little bit deeper into the teams and what they present and kind of how the matchup is going to shake out. But I also did want to let you guys know, remind you, we will be going live post-game. John Neighbors and I, potentially Curtis Wilkerson, potentially Scotty Bordelon, will be going live, recapping every game that we see. Really looking forward to that. So join us, for the postseason action. As soon as Arkansas plays at 2 p.m. on Friday, I should point that out. So as soon as that game ends, wait around. We'll be going live from some location, whether that's Tin Roof, our new studio, or maybe we'll be back here in our houses. Who knows? But we will be doing an official Natty State Sports post-game show. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you guys are too. It's going to be a fun postseason. Strap in, because it's just getting started. The season, spoiler alert, it ain't ending this week. It ain't ending next week either. Probably isn't even ending the weekend after that. So there's a lot of ball to be played. Pace yourselves, strap in, try not to overreact to everything you see. I say that a lot on the show, and you'll never listen to me. It is what it is, though. But I'm looking forward to it. So I appreciate all you guys commenting in the chat. I see the chat popping off already. My guy H-Fan leading the charge. I really appreciate that. But before we get started, I do have to give us a quick shout out to one of our loyal and one of our best sponsors who love the Baumbastic Podcast, L Jennings Law. Just like in sports, preparation is key. And at L Jennings Law, they understand that more than anyone, specializing in estate planning, including crucial documents like trust, wills, power of attorney, healthcare directives. They ensure that your family is protected and provided for no matter what comes your way. Don't leave the future to chance. Which is what the Arkansas Razorbacks are about to do as they enter the NCAA tournament. Contact L Jennings Law today to create a plan that's as comprehensive as it is comforting. Experts in what they do, L Jennings Law. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, which, by the way, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Natty State Sports, Baumbastic Podcast, all of it. As you can see, their phone number is displayed there on the screen, 501-501-9455. That 9455 spells will, 501-501-WILL. L Jennings Law, you see their website there, www.ljenningslaw.com. If you want to check them out, see what they're all about, a Good Steward Firm. I'm really really pleased with that sponsorship. Those are our guys. We appreciate them tapping in with what we're doing. And for those of you that did not see, by the way, I guess I should go ahead and announce Arkansas, the Fayetteville Regional participants. Arkansas is obviously the 1 seed as the number 5 overall national seed in the NCAA tournament. And the 4 seed, the first team they will play will be Southeast Missouri State, a.k.a. SEMO, a.k.a. the Fighting Trevor Ezels. You may remember him, the Arkansas transfer from SEMO, who now, I believe, coaches. I think he's the hitting coach there at SEMO. Was a grad assistant a couple years ago. So that'll be cool. DVH has some ties there, and a familiar opponent that Arkansas has seen here a lot in the last few years. And then the game that if they win that game, they will face the winner of the 2 seed Louisiana Tech Bulldogs, where I went to school. Shout out to the boys from Ruston. Shout out to Ethan Bates, former Hog, Hot Springs kid, who's one of the best two-way players in the country. And we will absolutely be diving in a little bit more to that subject of him and the what it means for him to be returning to Fayetteville for the second time now. But another team that Arkansas is very familiar with, they will be playing the 3 seed Kansas State, who had a little bit of an up and down year there in the Big 12, but they were one of the last few, several teams in the tournament. The Kansas State Wildcats, a team that Arkansas has played more than any of those other teams. I think Arkansas is now 30-20 all time against Kansas State entering the weekend. Haven't played them as much here in recent years, but again, not a far team away. Plenty of familiarity there. Arkansas sent Blake Adams there even just a couple years ago, so there's some ties there. All pretty close. I mean, they call it a regional, but it is truly regional. This one, not much travel in there to be done. But that is your Arkansas. That is your Fayetteville Regional. 11 SEC teams made the NCAA tournament, by the way. There was kind of like some debate of whether it'd be 10, 11, or like how that would work out. But 11 teams got in. Pretty much every SEC team that was on the bubble got in. The only SEC teams, I guess, you got Missouri and Auburn clearly didn't make it in. Who would be the third one that didn't make it? Who else didn't make the tournament? Am I just completely blanking on this? Auburn. Someone in the comments let me know. Auburn and Missouri, but who's the 12th that didn't make it? Who knows? It is what it is. But anyways, like I said, 11 SEC teams, and like Ole Miss. That's right. Ole Miss didn't make the tournament after being the national title winners 2 years ago. They have now lost or missed out on the NCAA tournament twice. But credit to Ole Miss. At least they made it to Hoover this time around. Last year they didn't even make it to Hoover. So they got back to Hoover, immediately lost, and that was their season. But I thought it was interesting, like I was saying, that Hoover really didn't, we knew there weren't a ton of stakes going in for Arkansas, but if you look at some of the other teams, didn't seem like there was really a ton that mattered. Now, I guess you could argue if LSU had lost their opening game, perhaps maybe they don't make the tournament. Perhaps they're one of those teams on the outside looking in. Ole Miss, of course, got beat by Mississippi State. If they win that game, maybe they go on a run. I'm sure you can make an argument there. But like Florida lost on Tuesday night, and it was like, oh man, Florida's going to miss the tournament. We're not going to get to see Jack Caglianone in. South Carolina, Alabama. It felt like whoever lost that game was going to be the odd team out there a little bit. Both of those teams ended up getting in the tournament. I don't think there were any like real big surprises. And then of course with the national seeds, all of them pretty much just held serve, just kind of stayed in their spots. Even Arkansas going 0-2. So like I said, a little bit of a tough day for the SEC tournament crowd, because I know there were some people last week who were really adamant that the SEC tournament mattered, and it felt like every inning when Arkansas would like give up a home run or something, someone would reach out and be like, "Still think they're a lock? Still think they're a lock for a national seed?" It's like, yeah, pretty much, yeah, they are a national seed. Before we move on, let's get into some of these comments real quick. Let's see. H-Fan, one of the first comments he says is Tennessee or Wake Forest are out of the College World Series. That is true. That is very interesting. So Tennessee, the number 1 overall seed. Shout out to Tony Vitello and his bunch, who won the SEC tournament there on Sunday. Completed, a nice season. I think they have now won 50 games. They are going to test this curse of the 1 seed. Going to test the curse of Hoover and all that. Usually, if you do both, 1 seed and Hoover, typically not great, but we'll see how it works out for them. Wake Forest is headed to, I believe it was the East Carolina Regional. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I believe East Carolina is the 16th seed here in this tournament, and Wake Forest is their 2 seed. So I would imagine, if I had to guess, Wake Forest will probably be the betting favorite in that series, especially since they're not going to have to travel far at all. And that series would obviously be lined up with Tennessee. So what you could have is Chase Burns returning home to Knoxville. He was obviously there at Tennessee last year and led them to almost a title game last year, was one of their better guys. He's one of the best pitchers in the country. He's electric. He's a guy that was really like, when we were talking about the possibilities of like who could come to Fayetteville, who could not, like Wake Forest is a team I did not want to see in a 3-game series. Didn't want to see them in a regional setting. Didn't want to see them in Omaha setting. But potentially Arkansas could face them in Omaha, but if they do, it would be their first game in Omaha. And they would have just knocked off the number 1 overall seed. So I think most people would kind of take that. But that is very good. That is very interesting. Let's see. Flying Blind, loyal listener, legend says we're in here, whole new season now. I'll be there Friday. Hell yeah, Flying Blind. Hopefully I get a seat on the concourse so you can come say what's up easily and it'll be all great. Yeah, Addison with an important message here says good vibes only from here on out. Postseason is here. Let's go. Yeah, pretty much. Now look, obviously, guys, it's not going to all be good vibes. We're going to have moments where we panic. We're going to have moments where we waver. I just ask that you keep it to yourself or yell at your family. That's what you're supposed to do as a true sports fan. You're not supposed to go online and yell at the local podcast host whenever your team plays poorly. You're supposed to, take it out on the friends and family in your life. Like that's the way to be a sports fan. Come on. Everybody knows this. And then Flying Blind. All right, so we're getting right into it now. This Flying Blind wants to know, Andrew, you think Gage Wood starts Friday? I saw a few other comments kind of asking about who's going to start that first game. Will Arkansas go with Hagen Smith? Will they do whatever? I guess I also should mention we just talked to Dave Van Horn. We just had a press conference with him, which is what we were kind of waiting to do this show for. But yeah, we got to hear from DVH, got to hear his initial thoughts on the draw and just kind of the state of the union, if you will. Obviously, they found out these teams an hour and a half ago, so it's not like he had a detailed scouting report and could definitively be like, all right, we're starting this guy in the outfield, we're starting this pitcher on the mound or anything like that. But he basically, what he did was asked about the starting pitching and kind of if he had time to think about that. And he was like, well, we'll look at the matchups, we'll look at whatever. And, we'll see who's feeling right. We'll kind of make the decision from there. It'd be easier if we had like a set rotation. He said a lot there. What I took that as is I'm not committing to starting Hagen Smith game 1, which I think was expected. I think most people that have kind of been paying attention have noticed that DVH doesn't always throw his best pitcher in game 1, particularly when you're a 1 seed against a 4 seed that you probably should be able to beat either way. Me personally, I think that's the way to go. I don't care who starts game 1 as long as it's not Hagen Smith, frankly. That's just kind of the way I view it. I just don't think like DVH actually said it best. He said, your goal is to win 3 games this weekend. You have to win 3 to advance. If you're going to win the regional, that could be 3-0. That could be 3-1. Obviously, if you lose one of your first 2 games, you got to win a little bit more than 3. But that's kind of the way he's thinking of it is like, hey, we got to get 3 wins. What's the best way to get 3 wins here? Which I think was a little bit of a clue, a little bit of a tip in his hand, a little bit telling you that he didn't respond with, well, Hagen will go game 1 and then TBA after that. We'll figure it out. It wasn't a Hagen Smith and then we'll figure it out type of thing. I think, and I'm not breaking any news here necessarily, but I think that Arkansas is going to start either Gage Wood or Mason Molina in game 1. If I had to guess. Now, you could talk me into Brady Tigert. He came back and threw in the NCAA or the SEC tournament just the other day. Looked good in his first inning and then left an 0-2 breaking ball right down the middle and gave up a 2-run bomb and then had some control issues after that. But, you could talk me into that if they were just like, hey, whatever. He's looking great behind closed doors. We're going to roll with him game 1, junior, pitched in the postseason before. I mean, Brady Tigert, people forget, went 5 2/3 last year against Santa Clara in an elimination game, pitched really well. And that was really at that point in time was the longest outing of his career. So, and obviously he pitched for Arkansas in 2022 as a freshman. So there's some experience there. Mason Molina is also a guy who last year if I've said it once, I've said it 20 times on this show. Started an NCAA tournament game last year for Texas Tech, struck out 10, like has that pedigree as a weekend starter. He's used to taking the ball. He's used to pitching in big moments. He's used to pitching well in big moments. I don't think you can go wrong with that option. But I really do. I think literally about 20 minutes before I started the stream is when I really talked myself into Gage Wood being the game 1 starter. Now, Gage Wood, we talked about on last week's show, is coming off of this awesome outing against Texas A&M. He had been throwing the ball pretty well against Mississippi State and Florida and Kentucky and like had some good outings kind of that he was starting to build. And it was like, hey, Gage Wood as a starter might just be like this awesome thing that we have going on. He did not get a start in Hoover, which I think kind of surprised me. I also didn't think Arkansas was going to go 0-2 in Hoover, so perhaps that's part of it. But which surprised me a little bit that he didn't get a start. He came in after Hagen Smith, and it didn't go well for him. I believe he gave up 6 hits and like 3 or 4 runs and like 2 and a third, maybe 2 and some change. Didn't go particularly well for him against South Carolina. Ball was flying out, ball was jumping. He was not alone, but he did not have a great outing the other day. How does that affect, kind of how you feel about him, how I feel about him, all that? I still feel like Gage Wood is clearly one of Arkansas's top arms, stuff-wise, no doubt about it. And I like the mental, shift he's had here in the last couple months. Seems like he's thrown a ton of strikes. Even when he's getting hit, he's throwing a ton of strikes. I've kind of talked myself into him being the game one starter, whereas the last time we saw Gage Wood pitch against a non-SEC team, it was his first career start against Missouri State, and he threw really well. Threw 3 innings, scoreless, only had like the 1 hit. I believe he struck out 4 or 5. Like, clearly had good stuff. So, I mean, hey, do you start him against another mid-major team from Missouri? I don't know. I think it makes a little bit of sense. And also, I just think, there's obviously, when you're making this decision to not throw your ace in game one, ultimately you're basically risking losing that first game and looking stupid, which, is still going to be there no matter who they start. It's going to be there even if they start Hagen Smith. But ultimately, to me, it's like, if you can't beat the 4 seed with whoever you throw, I mean, Arkansas threw Caleb Bolden in 2021, and they still got the job done after, yanking him pretty early. But if you can't beat the 4 seed, I feel like you have bigger issues as a team anyway. Like, you probably weren't going to go on a deep run at all. So it's like, it doesn't really, it's not as big of a risk, at least big picture, to me as it is to some people, but who knows? And then Addison follows up with a nice little comment here. He says, really good, really curious how we use Molina. He's pitched really well in relief the past 2 weeks. Do we leave him there, or does he start game one? And yeah, that's another very fascinating aspect to this conversation is Mason Molina, who is, like I said, pedigree is a weekend starter, started every game he threw in last year, started every game he threw in for Arkansas up until about two or 3 weeks ago. And it went really well for him. I guess it was just 2 weeks ago. Texas A&M comes in, throws 3 innings, scoreless out of the bullpen, retired everyone he faced. That was awesome. He followed it up with a pretty good outing the other day in Hoover, throwing well out of the bullpen. So it's like, damn, is Mason Molina, is he just a bullpen ace now? Is that kind of just the way he's going to throw now? But ultimately, to me, the way I interpreted it was they got him back on track. He's fully healthy now. He could probably return to the situation he was in before, especially because it's not like Arkansas has 6 starting options who are just making their case known every day. I mean, even Gage Wood, who has been throwing the ball really well, didn't throw well in Hoover. So it's like, you can make an argument Mason Molina is the second best starting option for Arkansas on the mound. In fact, I don't even think it's that hard of an argument to make. So it is a fascinating question, Addison, of like, do you keep him in the bullpen where he's been throwing well and maybe giving you a little bit of stability there in the bullpen, or are you going to move him back to his starting role where maybe you can get more innings out of him? And Arkansas could desperately use some stability in the starting rotation. So I don't think there's like necessarily a wrong answer here. I'd be interested to hear some of you guys' comments. But it is what it is. Porkenstein says, "Are you on dial-up?" Maybe my internet's not great. Do I look super blurry to you guys? Do I look I don't know if this face is one you want to see in clear HD. That's what she said. With Justine says, "Let's go Hogs." Love you, Andrew. Well, we love you too, Justine. Appreciate you tapping in. Appreciate you being loyal. I've seen you in a few comment sections, so starting to get a recurring comments out of. That's what she said with Justine. Appreciate that. Mary Ellen Brown, known ball knower. She says, "I personally love the draw." I do too, and I guess this is this would be the time where I should go ahead and just give my comments on that. I love the draw. I really, really love the draw. A lot more than I loved last year's draw, where you had TCU, an Arizona team that also was like swinging the bats really well last year. I mean, Pac-12, all these parks are like 350 feet, so everyone swings it well there. But Arkansas ended up having to play Arizona, but I was kind of a little bit worried about that matchup as well. You also had Santa Clara, who was, they had dudes that were throwing like 97, 98. Clearly not like your father's 4 seed necessarily. Obviously, Arkansas ended up losing that regional to TCU. But I thought last year's draw, like if you're just comparing the two, not even close. Last year's draw was a lot more unlucky. Now, if you look at it on paper, TCU going into last year's tournament had not, they had won the Big 12 tournament, I believe. But like in the middle of the year, they faced a real lull where they were kind of on that tournament bubble. It was kind of a question of whether or not they were even going to get into the tournament. So it kind of made sense for them to be the 2 seed for Arkansas. It just was unfortunate because we all kind of knew how good they were and knew the potential of that group. And obviously they lived up to it in the postseason, getting all the way to Omaha. But yeah, I think I actually was just talking with Madison McIntyre, name drop, no big deal. But I was telling him, like, I think I would almost always rather play the mid-major team that overachieved rather than the high major team that underachieved. TCU being a prime example of like your high major team that underachieved a little bit, who's dangerous and super talented. By the way, TCU didn't make the tournament at all this year. A little bit of a surprise. A little bit. I kind of thought they might sneak in their last four in. But how about that? TCU Horned Frogs. You don't worry, guys. You will not have to play TCU in this NCAA tournament. I can confirm that. But yeah, if you're just comparing the draws, like I think Louisiana Tech on paper, yeah, they look every bit as good as TCU last year. And if you look at the resume, you could even make a case like, hey, they won more consistently. They're well rounded. They've got all these older guys. Like you can make a case. But I think we all kind of know deep down you would rather face Louisiana Tech than TCU of last year, especially. Now I mentioned Ethan Bates. He's clearly a dude. Louisiana Tech, Lane Burroughs has done a phenomenal job with that program at Louisiana Tech, like phenomenal job. And it's been a pretty slow build. He took over, I forget the dude's name. He went to Alabama for like a year or two, not Bohannon, whoever the dude was before him that stunk. But he had left Louisiana Tech to go to Alabama, kind of left that program in a little bit of shambles. And so Lane Burroughs kind of had to stabilize it. And he's been a slow build there to where now they're pretty much a consistent tournament team year in, year out. And they're a threat, man. They've got legit dudes. I'm not saying it's an easy matchup by any means. No, they're not a matchup. Louisiana Tech is not an easy matchup for anyone. But we're in the NCAA tournament. You're not going to get easy matchups. So don't feel the need if Arkansas loses their regional to come back and under this video and be like, you idiot, you said you love the draw. It's like, I like the draw. That doesn't necessarily mean Arkansas is guaranteed going to win it. But to Mary Ellen's point, I feel pretty good about it. I feel pretty good about it. Let's see. Yeah, J.R. Shelton is saying North Carolina got the shaft. I'm assuming that is LSU being their 2 seed is maybe what he's referring to. I'll be honest with you guys. Not as scared of LSU as everyone seems to be. Now, I did just spend a weekend at the beach with a bunch of LSU grads who it's kind of so funny because it's like it reminds you that sports fandom, like we all go through the same thing, man. Now, obviously, LSU won a national title last year. You and I have not experienced that just yet, but give it a few weeks. But they, I was listening to like my buddies and overhearing them talking, and they're like, "Man, this team's starting to get fun, man. Starting to peak at the right time." And then one of them is like, "Dude, they're totally about to lose in the regional." And I was like, "Yeah," but it's like it's just kind of one of those things where, as a sports fan, it's almost predictable. And I know some of you really like to try and predict the trail the whole way, and so you're like reverse jinxing it a little bit and be like, "Oh, about to go 0-2, about to get swept here," like. Kind of trying to do that, but it's just so funny how as sports fans, we all live on the roller coaster and we all experience the same things. It's pretty funny. Daniel Outlaw, speaking of haters, says Arkansas goes 0-2 in regional. Yeah, that would be quite that way. He also did call Arkansas going 0-2 in Hoover. So fair enough. You're halfway there, Daniel. Who knows? I tell you what, man, if Arkansas went 0-2, like legitimately, I think that would cause that would be a pretty big deal. Like, I don't think I'm breaking any news. I think the fan base and the toxicity and just the program, like it would be pretty drastic. It would be pretty drastic if that has. Yes, Michael Wilkins wants to know, hey, has Arkansas scheduled their first time to play yet? Yes, they have, Michael. They will be playing at 2 p.m. on Friday. They get the early game, and then obviously if you win Friday, you get to play at night on Saturday. I know Arkansas is really big. Dave Van Horn really likes playing that early game for a lot of reasons. One, like if there's any weather issues, at least you got your game in and like kind of let everyone else deal with the rain. But also it's about giving your team kind of the most possible rest time there. So if you play at 2:00, that first game on Friday, it's going to be scorching hot, like 95 degrees. Probably not going to get as many fans there as you would at 7 p.m., of course. But if you win, ideally, you don't have to play till 7 the next day. So you get like a full 24 hours plus a few to give your guys some rest so that if you're bringing back relievers or if, even on Sunday, if you're bringing back guys, it's not too bad. And I think just kind of keeping the rest there. But yes, long answer. Yes, Arkansas has scheduled their first pitch time. They will be playing at 2 p.m. against SEMO on Friday. The NCAA website says ESPN Plus. I know that's how it was last year. I know people really don't like ESPN Plus, and I don't blame you. It sucks, but it does look like that's kind of kind of where we're at. Let's see. H-Fan says Hagen is starting game 2. I trust H-Fan. I think he's right. We're going to go ahead and say first reported. Going there. Blaine Wagner says, can Aloy get it going? Seemed like he was swinging a lot of pitches out of the zone last week. Well, he does do that a lot. That is just that's kind of what Vahiva Aloy does. He swings out of the zone sometimes. Let's see. Look at the numbers here real quick. So, yeah, he went 1 for 9 in the SEC tournament. But the week before that, he had been pretty good. He had hit a huge 3-run home run against Texas A&M, went 2 for 5 in game 2. And then against Mississippi State was really good, had 7 hits in that series. Yeah, man, it's just kind of Vahiva. You just kind of have to live with the highs and the lows. Like you look at and then, like I said, you look at the numbers at the end of the year and you're like, oh, this guy's awesome. Hitting 275, 15 home runs, whatever it is he's going to end up with. But yeah, he definitely does swing out of the zone. But you don't do as much damage as Vahiva Aloy does without swinging through a few pitches that you probably shouldn't swing through. Let's see. Caleb Morris wants to know, could you be talked into a heavy dose of Will McIntyre against SEMO? Stuff has worked against mid-majors. It's funny. So one, yes, I can be talked into a heavy dose of Will McIntyre against SEMO. And yeah, his stuff has worked well against mid-majors. It's funny, as years past, it was the opposite. Like he was almost better against good teams because, SEMO sees a lot of guys that throw 87, 89 and, mixed speeds and are kind of junk ball guys. Whereas like Tennessee is more used to seeing your 96 to 98. They're geared up for that. So when they see a guy like Will McIntyre, it's a little bit of a change of pace. But ultimately, like I just think, one, Will McIntyre is, Arkansas is going to need outs out of Will McIntyre down the stretch if they are going to accomplish whatever it is you want them to accomplish. Winning the regional, winning the super, or going, making it to the semis, making it to the finals in Omaha, winning in Omaha. Like they are going, whatever your goal is, Arkansas is going to need Will McIntyre at some point to accomplish that goal. I think, Caleb, I'm glad you asked this question because it gives me a chance to kind of mentally frame how I want Friday to go. So let's say you start Gage Wood, and let's say Gage Wood gives you 5 innings of work, which, by the way, no guarantee. I think he's only done that like once or twice in his career, only been starting here for a few weeks now. Asking for 5 is a lot, but I think against, you're going to have a full workload. There's no, full rest, full workload, full everything. They'll let him go up over 100 pitches, I would imagine. I think Gage Wood can give you 5 against SEMO. I think that's just kind of like a standard, like right there. Like, it's not like asking for anything crazy, but also asking him to do a little bit, just do a little bit here. 5 innings. Now, let's say at the end of that 5 innings, the score is 7-2 Arkansas. I think that's the kind of situation you bring Will McIntyre into. Now, hear me out. With the goal of adding more runs and getting it up more into that like 10-2 range, maybe 10-3, 10-4, where you can kind of just experiment with the last couple innings. Your goal game 1, I feel like, should be to avoid having to use Gabe Gackle. Obviously, don't use Hagen Smith. But, if you have to use Christian Foucher, whoever, be prepared to use those guys. Because, you got to win this game 1 no matter what, especially if you're not pitching Hagen Smith. You kind of got to be prepared to do whatever. But I think the goal starting out, especially if Gage is able to get them to 4, 5, 6 innings, should be building a big enough lead to where you don't have to use like your top high leverage guys. And Will McIntyre, as we've seen, is a guy that could come in and get you like 1 or 2 big outs, but he can also, once you get you rolling, get you 2, 3, 4 innings. So I think if you go to Will McIntyre, maybe he's your guy that can kind of get you through while you figure out what it is you want to do, whether or not you want to, bring in Gackle, bring in Fouch, bring in Parker Coyle, bring in Faraday, whoever. I feel like Will McIntyre is a good, like, we'll just throw him, and then the offense will either score 5 runs or they won't. If they don't score and he gives up a couple, of course, you got to go to Gabe Gackle. But I think Will McIntyre could be like their get out of jail free card a little bit. Let's see. Let's see. Flying Blind wants to know, how do you think that Virginia regional plays out? State going to run through it. So let me go ahead and pull this sucker up real quick. So yeah, Virginia is the 12 seed overall. They will be kind of lined up with Arkansas. So the winner of that regional will obviously play the winner of the Fayetteville Regional. And in there as the 2 seed, you have the Mississippi State Bulldogs, who Arkansas, I guess, finished their home schedule against. The last team Arkansas played at Baum Walker Stadium was Mississippi State. And now potentially they could be playing them next week. Just kind of one of those things. Obviously, Arkansas won that series. So, I mean, you'd have to feel pretty good about the matchup. And Arkansas didn't even play that well in that series. So you got to feel pretty good about the matchup if you're Arkansas. But Mississippi State, a lot of talent, really well rounded. I think there are a lot of fans who would agree probably like would rather see someone else. But yeah, like I said, Virginia, the 12 seed in that regional, they're hosting it. State is the 2 seed. You got St. John as the 3 seed and Penn as the 4 seed. So maybe one of those bottom 2 teams just make a run or crazy, something like that. Virginia seems pretty well rounded. Seems like they can really swing it. Arkansas's faced Virginia in a lot of postseason games here over the last 10, 12 years. Maybe the most fun postseason game of my lifetime, 2009 against Virginia, and I guess it ended up being like 2-1 or 2-0, maybe 2-1, 3-2, something like that. Went into extra innings. The Brett Eibner home run, the Tim Carver double play ball, Dallas Keuchel coming out of the bullpen and throwing like 4 innings, getting out of a ton of jams. There's been some fun matchups, and obviously Arkansas also won the Charlottesville Regional in 2015. That's not true. They didn't win the Charlottesville Regional. It was a Stillwater Regional completely. They faced Virginia in the 2015 World Series. So I guess they just only play Virginia and Omaha. That's just kind of the way it works. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll have to watch a little. I have to look a little bit more at Virginia. But no, I don't think I don't think State's going to run through it. I think those 2 teams are like the clear top 2 teams in that regional. Like there's a pretty clear drop off after them. I'd imagine it's going to be pretty tightly contested. I mean, you imagine when it's 2 top teams in a regional, it's pretty much a 3-game series between them. You're going to play in the 1-0 game. You're going to play in an elimination game, and then potentially another elimination game. I think Mississippi State is very much capable of winning that game, that 1-0 game. I'll tell you one thing, one quick thing about Mississippi State before I dip out of here. So, or not dip out of here, before I move on. Jurangelo Sagente. That's not how you pronounce his name, but the switch pitching guy, the ambidextrous guy, who you guys may remember only threw right-handed against Arkansas. Arkansas was the first team that he basically threw away the 6-fingered glove and was like, I'm just going to throw righty. And he threw right-handed to Arkansas, and he threw pretty well. Not one of his like peak outings or anything, but I think that was kind of the moment he was like, all right, I'm not doing the switch pitching thing anymore. I haven't seen him do it since. I watched him pitch in Hoover the other day, and he gave up a few runs, but he looks really, really impressive. I mean, fastball up to 98. Seems like he's commanding it even better now. Off-speed stuff is gross. He's a guy that is he's one I wouldn't want to face in the postseason. It seems like he's kind of kicking it into gear here now. But that's one guy that I would have circled if I were Virginia, where it's like, man, I really hope they throw him game 1. Michael Wilkins wants to know, how can you watch the Arkansas Razorback game? Is it only on ESPN Plus? I'll have to check. They just announced it like a few minutes ago. I'm only going off the NCAA website. It seems like it, though. Pretty much ESPN Plus. Now, of course, there's like people that do streams of these things. Who knows? If anybody knows of an underground stream, reach out to Michael Wilkins and figure it out. But it does seem like this is an ESPN Plus only adventure, which kind of sucks. And then Devin Talley wants to know, how are we feeling about Mississippi State coming back here for Super, which I kind of just touched on a little bit there. But the way I view it really, though, is Mississippi State is very good. They're a really good, well-rounded team. Their top 2 starters are really solid. So, I mean, you think about a 3-game series where you have 2 starters that have been giving them 6-7 innings consistently, can really shorten it up real quick there. But the way I view it is Arkansas played about as poorly as they could have played, especially from a pitching standpoint, against Mississippi State a few weeks ago. Even Hagen Smith only gave Arkansas 5 innings, gave up 3 runs. First team to really give him, to crack him for 3 runs since James Madison. And really the first team that actually got to him. Shout out to Ozzy, who actually coined this take. But Mississippi State was really the first team that got to him. James Madison hit a 3-run bomb in the first inning, kind of ambushed him early. And I think there were a couple walks that led to it. But like Mississippi State, like kind of was chipping away, and then eventually broke through. Clearly they match up pretty well with Hagen Smith. And when I say match up pretty well, I mean as well as one can match up against Hagen Smith. It's not an ideal matchup for anyone. But it seems like they figured something out a little bit there. But again, Arkansas only gets 5 innings out of Hagen Smith. I believe they got like 5 outs out of Brady Tigert. And I want to say they only got 3 outs out of Mason Molina. They kind of had to piece it together with a bunch of dudes, had to bring a bunch of dudes back multiple times. It was not an ideal series for Arkansas, but they came back from 2 deficits and really like gave themselves a chance to win all 3 games. Came back and won a comeback from behind victory in game 3, which was electric. My mom loved that on Mother's Day. And then in Friday, they bounced back. It was back and forth the whole time. I feel like that series gives Arkansas a lot of confidence, a lot of experience going into this type of postseason high leverage situation. But it also tells me that Arkansas beat Mississippi State at their absolute worst, basically. Arkansas being at their worst, I mean. So I don't know. I would have a hard time not feeling pretty confident in Arkansas in that situation. But I mean, it's really tough to beat any of these teams. But it's not going to be easy against Mississippi State for sure. Daniel, she says, even I'm not predicting Arkansas to go 0-2 in the regional. Laughing emoji. Shout out JT Hazelwood says, "What's up, pal? What's up, JT? Good to hear from you. Good to see you doing well. Glad that you're alive, man. Glad that everybody, I mean, everyone on this stream here, everyone listening, for those that were affected by the tornado that came through Rogers the other night, man. I was out of town, of course, but I saw pictures and geez, man, it happened at like 2 a.m. And I remember seeing something on Twitter right before I went to bed and kind of seeing tornado Rogers, but like I was so tired that I didn't really like process it. And then I just wake up the next morning and see all these pictures. Seemed like it was rough, man. So I hope everybody was able to stay safe. Hope everybody, doesn't have too much damage going on. And if so, we're here to help. Let us know. Let us know what we can do here at the Baumbastic Podcast, here at Natty State Sports. But again, hope everyone's staying safe to the best of their abilities. So thoughts and prayers, T's and P's to all those affected, man. It's some scary stuff for sure. But shout out to JT Hazelwood, one of my good buddies, and a great lad, great lad, great friend of the program. Let's see. Porkenstein wants to say, who would be the best at a short turnaround if we have to come out of the losers bracket? So I'm guessing if Arkansas loses one of their first 2 games. Well, I'll tell you, we talked about Will McIntyre earlier. And I know I understand Will McIntyre is not the most popular guy among the fan base at these time and day. But that's a guy that immediately comes to mind of like, if Arkansas is going to need like 2-3 outings out of a guy, need some people to throw 45 pitches and then come back a day or 2 later and throw 60 more, Will McIntyre is going, like if in that scenario where Arkansas loses one of their first 2 games of a regional, you will absolutely be seeing Will McIntyre plenty. Stone Hewlett's a guy that, of course they don't extend him a ton, but they use him multiple outings a week, and they've done that a few times this year. I think they'd have no problem doing it in a regional setting, especially if it's just like 1-2 outs at a time. Gabe Gackle is also, I guess he's now done it twice this year, maybe 3 times. I think just twice actually, because he didn't throw it in game 3 against A&M. Twice this year where he's come back for 2 times on a weekend. Against Mississippi State, it went really well. Against Auburn, it didn't go as well. Wasn't a huge sample size. But I'd imagine he's going to be a guy that kind of has to. And weirdly enough, Fouch is a dude that they've used multiple times on a weekend, a few times. I think he's a guy that, you won't extend him. If you throw him 40 pitches in an outing, of course he's burned. But if he throws like 15 to 20 pitches on Friday, I could see him throwing 20 to 30 pitches on Sunday or Monday or whatever. I think they'll use him plenty. And then I think Parker Coyle is like a guy that just seems to maybe have one of those rubber arms, throws a ton of strikes. Stuff is pretty much the same pitch 1 as it is pitch 60, like which to be fair is not like swing and miss, like breaking stuff or anything. But I think he's a guy they would definitely use a few times. So Arkansas's got some candidates there, in terms of guys that could use, multiple tricks a weekend. Ooh, let's see. This is a good one. Chad Rogers says, prediction for regional MVP if the Hogs win. I'm going to go with a little bit. Okay. Well, I was going to say, I have a really good feeling that Hagen Smith is about to have like a vintage, like peak dominant Hagen Smith start, like a 7 innings, 16 strikeouts type of outing. I really do think, I mean, when you talk about Hagen Smith and you think about like how his season ended last year, losing twice to TCU, every time we talked to Hagen Smith this offseason, he would bring up like, hey, I really didn't like the way last year ended. Dave's brought it up a few times. He really didn't like how that TCU. That tells you, one, Hagen Smith, like, competitor. Of course, he didn't like the way it ended last year. I mean, nobody did. But the fact that so many times it's come up lets you know just how deeply like it really shook Hagen that like, the season was on the line and, he was on the mound and Arkansas didn't win. I'm sure that, of course it's, not like any of us hold that against Hagen or like blame him or anything like that. But, in his brain, he does. So I just feel like we're going to get, your peak, like pissed off Hagen. So I think he's going to have a good chance if he puts together the outing I'm kind of forecasting for him. But I'm going to go Peyton Stovall. Guy who has shown up in the NCAA tournament before. I mean, as a freshman in 2022, I guess kind of like made his name as a prominent player in this country by what he did in the NCAA tournament in Stillwater and in Omaha, having 5 hits. I think, team captain, leader. Might be the best hitter on the team, just period. Might be the best player on the team, period. Though he did have a weirdly rough go of it defensively in Hoover. I don't know what was going on there. But, I think he's a guy who probably also isn't pleased with the way he's been playing here the last couple of weeks. I think Peyton Stovall is my prediction for like the guy that gets Arkansas going, the guy who leads the charge offensively, and we'll see how Arkansas does. H-Fan says Kendall Diggs is who he's got. He has a big Friday and gets hot. That's what he says. Boy, wouldn't that be something? That'd be something. If Kendall Diggs, like, regardless of what he ends up actually doing, it feels like every Kendall Diggs hit is going to carry so much weight for Arkansas, just because it's like they're kind of waiting on the top to come off that and just let him explode. If you see Kendall Diggs start swinging the bat well, man, that would certainly change the dynamic of this Arkansas lineup and just kind of this overall team. Yeah. Porkenstein says it was 4-3 that Virginia game. Yeah, I couldn't remember. It was back and forth the whole time. And I remember Brett Eibner hitting. I guess Arkansas was down 3-1 when Brett Eibner hit that huge 2-run home run to tie it, and then they win in extra. So that makes sense. I'll take it. We've got a Gerangelo pronunciation update here from Daniel Shee, my guy, the unofficial co-host of Baumbastic Podcast. Gerangelo Sanja, courtesy of the Mississippi State Media Guide. Gerangelo Sanja. It's spelled like Ciginte, but it's Sanja. Sanja. Interesting. MJO says, watching bases loaded telecast is mandatory viewing this time of year. You are correct, 100%. It really actually is like one of the better things that ESPN, like college baseball coverage that they do during the tournament. They just do like the bases loaded channel where it kind of just takes you to, wherever the action is happening. It's kind of like the NFL Red Zone channel, but for college baseball. And it's pretty sweet, especially if, obviously if you're watching Arkansas, you'll have the TV on the Arkansas game, but it's like, that night when there's all kinds of games happening, you kind of just want to scan. You don't have really like a viewing interest one way or the other. I think that's pretty cool. So that's like listen to MJ. That Bases Loaded podcast is legit. Let's see. Caleb Moore says, outside of Fayetteville Regional, thoughts on Mason Neville with 16 home runs for Oregon, leading them to the tournament. Yeah, how about that? They said that on the broadcast today. They were like, Mason Neville, one of the best hitters in the Pac-12. Credit to Mason Neville, by the way, because it seems like here in the last like 2 to 3 months, it's really taken off for him. Like something's clicked in his brain. Now, obviously, for those that don't remember, Mason Neville was Arkansas's highest touted position player in last year's recruiting class. He and Jason Jones both turned down money to come to Arkansas. We're both kind of like the two blue chip position player prospects. I guess you could say like the Helfer Consuza of this year a little bit. They were kind of the two like ones where it was like, oh man, like these guys get an impact right away. And obviously it didn't really happen for either one, but Mason Neville in particular, like he really had a rough go of it in Fayetteville. I remember his first fall practice at Arkansas. He hit like, I think he went like 3 for 4, like a triple and a single, and like just looked awesome. And it was like, oh man, like you're kind of seeing all the tools. And then he went like 2 months without getting a hit, like just striking out a lot. Really, struggled to adapt to SEC pitching as everyone does when they do, when they first get here, especially at 18 years old. Wasn't able to get on the field consistently for Arkansas, but just make some starts here and there. Got to start an SEC play against Mississippi State, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it just never really happened for Mason. He enters the portal in the offseason, goes to Oregon, and now he's playing every day, and he's hitting like 265, has 16 home runs, is basically like one of Oregon's top hitters, one of the most impactful hitters in that conference. 16 home runs ain't nothing to scoff at. That would lead Arkansas, by the way. I believe Vahiva Loy has 13 home runs. So yeah, it would literally lead Arkansas. So I mean, look, I'm happy for Mason, man. That's awesome. Good to see him get it going, man. He's such a talented kid. And by the way, the reason I said he just got it going recently is because I checked on his stats like 3 months ago, and he's hitting like 205 with like a crazy strikeout rate. And I was like, oh yeah, he's kind of, more of the same from Mason Neville, like not really able to make consistent contact, but it seems like he's really he's taking it up here a notch. And I mean, that kid's really talented. So it's not the most stunning thing in the world, but it has to hurt a little bit. Harold Cole's also hitting like 320 with like 14 home runs at Houston, playing second base, but it is what it is. Haddon Rogers, I hope I'm saying that right. Haddon Rogers, Haddon, says highlight Holt could happen. I mean, probably a lock to happen, man. I mean, Peyton Holt just does stuff, man. He's it just is what it is, man. He's a stud, dude. And I feel like he's another guy where, like, if you're gonna see the best version of this Arkansas offense down the stretch, it's probably gonna include a little bit of Peyton Holt there. Let's see. Yeah, Mary Ellen says when they said Mason Neville on the broadcast, they said it wrong, and I said it's Neville immediately when I wasn't even paying attention. Shout out to Mason Neville, who I remember asking him, I was like, wait, is it Neville, Neville? And he said it's just like Fayetteville, Neville. I was like, oh, Fayetteville, Neville. Okay, there you go. Although he is now Autzen, or where's that's the stadium. Where's Oregon at? What's the name of the city? Eugene. Now he's Eugene Neville, but it is what it is. Flying Blind wants to know, where has Cody Frank been? Have I missed something? I'll tell you what happened. That one stream I did where y'all would not, everybody in the comments was like, what's going on with Colin Fisher and what's going on with Cody Frank? And I was like, guys, stop worrying about this. Cody Frank is, he's there. He's around. I'll say this about Cody Frank. No, I'll just say this, Flying Blind. You're probably not going to see him this postseason unless like something weird happens. But he has not been on the roster. He went on the roster for the last couple SEC weekends. I don't know for sure about Hoover. I was out of the mix a little bit. But no, I mean, he had been struggling a little bit, hadn't been going well for him. And really all year, they haven't been using him in a ton of high leverage situations. It's more just kind of like eat a few innings for us so this doesn't get out of hand. But it just hadn't gone particularly well for him. They haven't been using him. And I think Parker Coyle and a few other guys getting it going has not helped in that regard. Porkenstein wants to know how Dossett is doing. How is Dossett doing? So by all indications, Cooper Dossett's fine. Like they early when he left that game against A&M, it was like, oh man, what's going to happen? They immediately said that there was no like structural damage. They did MRI, they did X-rays and all that. Seemed like he had avoided anything crazy, but I was kind of like, oh yeah, I mean, who knows? But I think he's throwing again. Now, when I say throwing again, I'm talking about like off to the side, like warming up. Like I don't know if he's throwing bullpens or if he's like really throwing to hitters or if they're like really ramping him up to pitch like this weekend. But it does seem like he's healthy. Now he's another one where it's like kind of weird where it's like even when he's fully healthy, we don't know if he's going to pitch. So I don't know what that means for his availability this weekend. We'll keep an eye on it. They will have an open practice for us. I don't know what day it'll be. I guess probably Thursday will be an open practice. You guys will hear from me before then. But I am looking forward to getting out to that open practice and kind of just scanning for stuff like that and really just to kind of see who's on the roster for the postseason. So that'll be interesting. One thing I do want to say about Cody Frank, just because I feel like I've never told the story publicly, and I feel like it says a lot. And frankly, he might not pitch again for Arkansas. So I do want to go ahead and get it out now. So I went to the Baton Rouge series that Arkansas played last year when Arkansas played at LSU against Paul Skeens and all those guys. Me and my buddy Robert Stewart went down to Baton Rouge and watched that series. And I remember seeing Cody Frank like hopping down from like the stands to the dugout after the game and kind of like going in there and talking to some guys. And I asked the SID, I was like, dude, Cody Frank's here. Because if you remember, Cody Frank got hurt pretty early last year and they shut it. It was out for the year, like right away. So I was like, I thought it was weird that he was with the team when he's out for the year and like not really doing anything. And I was like, oh, that's, interesting, but like whatever. And so I asked the SID, I was like, well, Cody Frank, like y'all just let him come on the trip. And he said, nah, he drove down here. He drove his truck down here. In fact, he couldn't fly with the team because there was like something wrong. It's like something, I think it was like a weird thing where after his surgery, like he couldn't go to a high enough elevation, like the pressure would be bad. And so they were like, hey man, sorry, we can't take you on this trip. And he was like, bet, I'll just drive my truck from Fayetteville to Baton Rouge. which anyone who's done it knows it's not like an easy drive. It's not like going Fayetteville to Alma. It's a pretty, you got to go through a lot of stuff. And I thought that was awesome. And he got married at Baum-Walker Stadium after the season, which tells you, I mean, I say married. He got engaged at Baum-Walker after throwing like 11 innings last year. So I think those two stories kind of tell you just like what it means to Cody Frank to be a Razorback and like how much he loves this program and like being a part of it. So I just honestly, I don't think I'd ever shared that story. And I was like, you know what? I really want to make sure people know that. In 10 years, you'll be like, oh yeah, remember that Cody Frank guy? I just want you to remember he was all hog, man. He was all hog through and through. Mary Ellen just chimed in with that. He was the bullpen coach after he got hurt too, which is true. Yeah. I mean, like that. I mean, how many guys do you see in sports at any sport that get hurt and then they're just kind of, off to the side and you don't really ever hear from them? Like it is what it is. Which by the way, I'm going to use Jackson Wiggins as an example, not in any way to be like throwing shade at Jackson Wiggins. He was going through a Tommy John rehab. Like he was around the team. It's not like he just dipped and left, but it's like, you didn't see, like, how many times did y'all see Jackson Wiggins around the baseball, like in the dugout or around the baseball team last year? Or Peyton Paulette the year before. Peyton Paulette, in-state kid who like loves the Hogs. Those are two other guys who like were all hog through and through, but like you didn't really see them around when they were injured, and it made sense. None of us even like questioned it. So I just think it says a lot about Cody Frank that he was around, and you'll see him around in this postseason, whether he's on the roster or not. He'll be around. He'll be coaching up the guys, like truly 100% all hog, all great teammate. So yeah, boys, I'm gonna end the show on that note there. If you have any last questions, now is the time to hurry up and smack it and get those in. But I did want to appreciate you guys for joining me today on this beautiful Memorial Day. I don't know if is there anybody here that's listening that's like got your burger and your hot dog, like you're doing the full Memorial Day thing and you're listening to the Baumbastic? If so, I love you. And, you're the man or woman. And I appreciate that. But yeah, hope you guys had a good Memorial Day weekend. I'm about to go get myself something to eat here. But it has been another fantastic edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. And just a reminder, we will be back at least 2 more times this week. But we are absolutely not done streaming. We are not done talking about this team. So if you've still got questions of kind of how is this going to shake out, we will be back. We will be joining. I will update you guys. Be on the lookout for like kind of the timing of those streams. I'm not sure how it's going to work. If it'll be like tomorrow afternoon or Wednesday afternoon, or maybe a Thursday before the practice, maybe a Thursday after the practice. Like who knows? But we will be keeping you updated with all things Arkansas baseball. And like I said, we're going to be doing our post-game shows throughout the postseason for as long as they go. And I'm looking forward to that. Those should be a lot of fun. Perhaps there'll even be like a call-in aspect for that. We'll have to talk to John about that. We'll have to talk to the boss man, get that set up. But a lot of fun to be had this postseason. And like I said earlier, it's just starting. This weekend is just the first step, and it's a very important step, one that you kind of have to get in there. But it's just part of the journey, and I'm looking forward to it, man. The stakes are high, the energy's high. I'm back from vacation. I'm dialed in, dude. I'm ready to go. And I hope you guys are ready to have a lot of fun this postseason, because we are just now starting. And like I said, it's Andrew Ellis, and it's been another edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. Appreciate you guys for joining me. Y'all have a great Memorial Day.